you got a chance to talk with George Carlin early in your career, and he actually gave you some advice. So what did he say that really helped you out?
So just to clarify, when I was 15, so I started stand up when I was 16, but when I was 15 and knew I wanted to do stand up, my dad encouraged me. He was like, if you want to do something, you should reach out to the people that are already doing it to get advice. So I made a list of like 40 comedians that I loved, and like truly like everyone from like George Carlin to I don't know, like Greg Giraldo. I mean, sadly, rest in peace, Greg Giraldo, but you know, was like a no-name comic in, if I wrote to him in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So I made this huge list. I found people's addresses. I got their emails. I like fan groups, like whatever it was. And I wrote to all of them. And all I wrote was like, hey, I'm 15. I want to do stand-up. Do you have any advice? And two people got back to me. Judd Apatow, and this is Judd Apatow pre 40-year-old virgin, pre what he is now. He had finished Freaks and Geeks, but I think Undeclared might have still been on TV. So again, I think this is like 2001. So he still had his email on his website. Like that shows you where he was. Yeah. And I wrote to him and I was like, I love your stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I want to do stand up. And he got back to me right away. And it was like, you should go to college for writing and good luck to you. And it was very nice. I've briefly met him since then, but I never was like, hey, I wrote to you when I was 15 and you wrote me back. But he's very nice. I just didn't have the heart to be like, But I had I found the address to George Carlin, which turned out to be, he had an office that he would go to every day and write. And I found his address online and I just wrote him and I was like, hey, I've never done stand up, but I love it and I want to do it. And I'm a fan. And if you have any advice, and my dad taught me to write it like a business letter. So it was my name, my address, my phone number, my email, letter. And then I like signed it. So he had even though I mailed it, he had all my information. And he called me when I was 15 years old and he was like, hey, is Liz there? And I was like, and I was the one that picked up the phone. I was like, yeah. And he's like, it's George Carlin. And I was like, what? Yeah. And he's like, I got your letter. And I was like, oh, man. Jesus. And so he gave me very simple advice because, you know, even now I kind of see that it's hard to give advice to somebody that hasn't done something yet. But he's like, you got to write every day. You got to write as much as possible. And you got to get up on stage. He's like, you can't wait any longer. You got to do it now. And so he was the one that really encouraged me to like, just fucking do it. Yeah. And then he's like, you can write to me anytime. So I would write to him every couple of months. I wrote to him after I did stand up for the first time. I got profiled in the New Yorker and I sent him a copy of it and he called me to say he read it and he really enjoyed it. He gave me free tickets to come see him in New Jersey when I was living in Jersey. I got coffee with him when I was 19 and he showed me his writing process. Like he took out his computer and showed like how he structures stuff. And that had one of the biggest impacts on me as an organist, because it starts to build up. Like, how do you organize all this material? Yeah. He was just, he was one of the most generous people I've ever met. And he was a legend and he didn't know me. And he sent me books. He signed some books for me. Just a kind person that happened to be a legend. And I would say the biggest impact he had on me is how he treated me. Like just the fact that I could do nothing for him. I had no connection to him. I wrote him a letter and he always got back to me. He never made me feel like a burden. He never made me feel like I couldn't do something. He never made me feel like it was impossible. And he just treated me with thoughtful respect that you would treat a peer when I was a teenager. And I would say his comedy clearly had a huge impact on me, but I would say how he treated me has had a rippling effect on me for the rest of my life. Like anytime I get it, and I was raised as a nice person. I always try to help people. I like helping people, but I think like I'm looking at, he right after we talked, he just mailed me a headshot and it says, "Go do it, Liz. George Carlin." And I'm looking at it like it's been on my desk for 18 years. So for me, I always get back to people, even if it's like, I don't know, or I don't have the time, or I'm so sorry, but I do my best to always try to see people, try to get back to people, try to treat people with respect, give the little bit of advice that I can, if I can give. You know, it gets harder and harder. And I don't know how he was able to do that. I don't know if I wish I asked him. I wish I really understood not even like, there's so many things I asked him comedically, but almost now being 18 years into my career, having a fan base now, not, you know, he had millions and millions of fans. I have thousands and I'm overwhelmed. And people didn't have access to him the same way I did. Like, I wrote a letter and, you know, and I was able to talk to him on the phone here and there, like, and he gave me his email and we would email occasionally towards the end, but people can get in contact with me every which way, in any, like email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you know, it's incessant, and I'm grateful for it, but I'm overwhelmed by it. And there's a part of me, almost like a father figure, wish I could sit down and be like, how did you do that? How did you make me feel special when I was one of millions?